So here's what we mean kind of about this environmental analysis, right? So we have our industry, we have the forces that are shaping competition, that was our five forces. But here are a bunch of other pieces of the puzzle. There's the natural environment, there's the demographics of a country or of a local community. There are social structures in places, government and politics, and there's a technological environment, and we have to realize that firms don't operate in just a simply national economy. We're definitely in a global economy. So all of these things are impacting the industry environment, right? Another piece of the puzzle here to get at what is shaping competition, what is shaping profits. We know that it has to do with, again, the number of players. We know that it has to do with how firms insulate themselves. And now we have to think about, we know that it has to do with larger forces. Again, things like culture and things like the national economy. So this firm is embedded in multiple layers that allow it to either thrive or will eventually lead to its decline. Okay, so we can start to evaluate this macro environment, right? This massive structure of things. It's very difficult sometimes to first start to think about, but we can do it through an institutional analysis, institutional lens, if you will. We can start to think about these formal and informal institutions. And these are going to be just another piece of the puzzle as to what is shaping the nature of competition. So, in firms that exist in industries that are highly regulated, these are going to be barriers to entry. It's going to shape the nature of competition. To deal with all the rules, laws, and regulations, required seals of approval, again, these are all costs. These are going to act as gatekeepers to more firms. In very loosely regulated environments, it's much easier to play the game. What's another type of institution? Norms, prevailing practices. Okay, so what should a firm do? Now, thinking about this in a different way, when we think about competitive advantage, like we did in last class, remember we had those things that were truly unique to a firm that did allow value beyond what's average in the industry, and then we had parity. So you can think of norms, these prevailing practices, as things that competitors have to do simply because their competitors do it. Again, it's more of a competitive parity. So those are going to be prevailing practices. If your rival is doing something that has become status quo for the end user, you also have to do that, or you have to fundamentally change your value proposition and try to differentiate yourself in a different way. But generally, you find firms that are very, very similar. They're going to be doing most of the same things. Again, they just wrap it up in a different package. Cognitive institutions. Again, think about the first minute I talked to you in this presentation. The things you know are right and wrong, you don't really know why when you establish such evaluation. So this is another sense of the institution. So, related to business, consumers sometimes need a sense of safety. Um, Consumers need a way to make the transaction with you. You have to kind of think about all of these different layers as to what the end user or the end buyer will have to go through to get your product. On the most simplistic basis, a grocery store cannot sell food without tellers. They can't sell food without ways to get money from your bank to their bank. Those are things, again, they're accessing the institutional and social environment. They make it easy. Think about one way that banks, or that I gave it away. That one way that grocery stores make it even easier for you to buy food. They put banks in their stores, right? All of these things are carefully considered to make sure that the end user doesn't have to think about these things. And in the end, they'll just simply buy more. That's good, right? That's the whole point of the business. So again, if we really wanted to drill down and think about this institutional level, it's these enablers and constraints that are have to be dealt with. Again, not easy to identify, but something we absolutely have to do if we're understanding the nature of competition or we're in this competitive game and we're trying to make sure that we can deal with competition. Okay, so what could be formal institutions? Things that you see, laws, regulations, and rules. They are generally the ones that are obvious. They're spelled out. Humans have created these to specifically target certain behaviors and actions. And we can pass them on easily. We can say, look, here it is. Here's the law. You can't do this. If you do this, we're going to sue, and you know that you've done something wrong. Informal institutions are a little tougher. Norms, cultures, and ethics. Culture is a massive body of social behavior. So these are going to be kind of difficult sometimes to recognize, but I can't emphasize this enough. Good managers are trying to figure out the norms, cultures, and ethics that are either going to push their company to a place of above average value, or allowing them to exist for a longer period of time. Here's a couple of definitions of institutions that I pulled up for you. Humanly devised constraints that structure human interaction, or regulatory, normative, and cognitive structures and activities that provide stability and meaning to social behavior. Okay, these are kind of generous ideas of institutions. They're both very positive. Um, but we have to realize that not all cases are institutions sometimes stable, right? Now, there's something to think about here. Once we recognize this institutional environment, we realize the true point of institutions, the true point of laws, regulations, rules, norm, cultures, and ethics, is to try to promote stability in some sense. The issue, though, is that what is stable and how to support stability today will eventually change through time. And this is going to lead to a firm having to reshape their idea of these institutions. Okay, so what can they do? Yeah, fundamentally, they reduce uncertainty. Once you know how to do something, you're essentially in an institutional environment. You have said, this is the way to act. The whole point is to reduce uncertainty. Why do we need to reduce uncertainty? Because dealing with uncertainty means cost, right? Everything from an economist is viewed as a cost. An economic decision that's rational is one where the benefit exceeds this cost. So institutions are here to reduce the cost of uncertainty, to create norms. We don't want to have to recreate the wheel every time we do something. Okay, so again, we're thinking about this from the perspective of what is the institutional structures that have created this strategic group that allow this industry to exist, and what are the things that are shaping the nature of competitions. All right, so drilling down a little bit more. How do they reduce uncertainty? Well, they are the things that allow us to know what to do in times of decision making. Contracts, right? What's the point of a contract? It spells out what to do, spells out what you can't do, and tells you what happens when you violate these rules, right? Contracts are fundamental to a functioning capitalist system. They are what tells people, don't do this, and if you don't do this, here's what's going to happen, okay? It creates an institutional structure of trust, to some degree, right? It kind of eliminates the problem with having to rely on informal trust. This says, here it is. This is the trust that we have together. So these can be in terms of arm's length transactions. They could be rule based. They're basically, these institutions are social contracts. Now, we know that, again, the system exists in one where it tells you what you can't do, and we enforce these contracts. We enforce these institutions by having lawyers, police, and ultimately the state. Right? So another pillar of our analysis of what's shaping competition is the fact that we live in a contractual world. Okay, that's either going to create more competition or less. Okay, moving forward. All right, here's some devices that you sometimes see that firms are using to access institutional feelings in a buyer. Okay, so let's look at some of these together. Tylenol. Why do they need to put safety seal on there? I mean, what are they really trying to get at? That your product hasn't been tampered with, right? They want you to feel like this is safe to consume, right? Letting you know nothing is bad or nothing is out of the ordinary with this product. You see these seals on so many of the packages that you purchase or that you buy, or you see them around in businesses. Okay, so look, I have FDIC. You pretty much want to know that your money is guaranteed, so up to $250,000. Right? You don't want to have the sense that this bank will just lose your money. Okay, so even though we know that it's there, we know that the regulatory structure is there, seals are used to again create a value proposition. Come to my bank, at minimum, you know your money is guaranteed. Other than that, it's all bets off. EPA approved. So firms will put this on their packaging to say, look, this is environmentally friendly, or we'll see FDA approved, right? Things that we know that just should be the case. are used, again, to reinforce the fact that this is the right thing to buy, this is the right thing to consume. In the most generic sense, 100% safe, guaranteed. You see things like natural, you see things like images that try to promote an idea of what the product is. Go back to my good old friend Milk. What do? They name their company something related to a farm, right? All of these things are we're going beyond this idea of marketing. We're kind of deconstructing what marketing is. It's accessing an institutional environment. It's trying to shape the institutional environment. It's trying to tell a story as to why this product or why your firm has more value than a rival. Okay. All right. So I've got another clip here for you. I love beer. And so another example of institutional devices is, pretty basic. What is craft? Right? This is a big discussion for beer economists. Yes, there really are beer economists. What does it mean to be craft? Well, there is a definition. It is asserted by the Craft Brewer Association. And what it means to be craft is pretty much plain and simple. Traditional styles, right? And that can be widely interpreted. And you have to produce equal to or less than 6 million barrels of beer. Now, to give you some context of how much beer that is, your local Boulevard, they only produce 200,000 barrels of beer. So that sounds more craft than 6 million. But these are institutional devices that create a value proposition. They're defined so that you recognize this is something better than something that's coming from a macro brewery, whether it's needed or not. Whether a macro brewery that produces 6 million and one barrels produces great beer, well, it's out of the designation of craft, right? These are just things that, again, are adding value. Firms are trying to do whatever they can to create some differentiation, and by and large, they're using the institutional environment to do this. So click on the link, check out Craft Brew. You may not know this. Now, I know not everybody's a beer fan, but I think this is a pretty good example of an institutional structure that most of us are pretty familiar with. Okay, so check out the clip, and we'll pick up in the next video.